Aloha, soul family. Welcome to our end of the days, and that's DAZE. As always, or I should say as usual, unedited, raw footage, so hope you can appreciate that. I'm just going to kind of get into the subject. It's very interesting living here on the islands of Hawaii. Currently living on the island of Oahu. And before I get into my experiences living here or further explain that, I'm going to kind of give a little bit of background into my own experiences because it's somewhat of a touchy subject. It doesn't matter where you are though, because this kind of stuff exists everywhere, you guys. Seriously. So I grew up initially, my first few years of my life in California, Southern California to be specific, and it was what it was. A very large percentage of the populace there was Mexican. And as a white person, and I'm just gonna verbatim say what the races are. If you want to flag me or whatever, I mean it as honest as possible. I think just talking about it is what we can really do. Dancing around the subject is just makes it harder to understand people, if you ask me. Anyway, so going into it, I me and only a few families that I knew were white, and the vast majority of everybody was really Mexican. And I remember a few blacks as well, but it was really whites, blacks. We were the minority for the most part, and it was a very large Mexican population. And it just was what it was. I didn't especially being a kid, I didn't really think about that. And when you're really young, I would say unless your parents are extremely prejudiced, you're not really going to pick up on it. As a kid, it's just like, oh yeah, you look different, you come from a different family, but hey, we still got that human spirit, with us. And so I don't really remember experiencing real racism in California when I was a kid. But like I said, I was only a kid. I wasn't very old, and so when my family ended up moving, of all places, we ended up moving to North Idaho. And that was for me, and I think for the rest of my family too, actually, it was culture shock. The reason is because everybody was white. Like every single person was white in North Idaho. I mean, very, very few people were of a different skin color. And so, at least from my end and from my experience, everybody that I knew of treated them with respect, because it was just like, wow, you're not from around here, right? Wow, what made you choose, North Idaho to either visit or stay here? And there could have been, racism behind the scenes. I obviously didn't go with these people, but everybody was white. Now, to say that there was no prejudice, absolutely not. All right, very much so. Where the prejudice ended up being classism in a very deep way, and just as a side note, this is why South Park, they did an episode on that where everybody was basically the same. I can't quite remember. I think it was like Scientologists, but then there were like different levels of Scientology, or everybody was the same religion, but then what I'm essentially saying and what they were pointing out is that prejudice is going to exist as long as prejudice exists. All right. It's like the easiest way to say it. And so, was there discrimination in North Idaho? Absolutely, even amongst white people. And a lot of the times you could tell different white people very easily. All right. And natural born Idahoans had a manner of talking, and they usually would be like, they were considered hicks, people who were, and I can't even think of a term for it. My grandmother said there was discrimination in her high school, and they'd be like, oh yeah, what are you, a farmer? And then that was like a slam, because that means like you're low white trash if you're a farmer. And it wasn't quite like that in my school, but I experienced prejudice against me more harshly in North Idaho than I did in California. Now, it could have just been because I was getting older, and through the ages of like middle school and then high school, and so it could have just been more prominent where prejudice was going to exist. And this is why don't even get me started on public schools. I'm not a big fan of public schools. We got to do huge reforms if we're going to keep that system. I'm not even necessarily saying we should keep that system. Anyway, moving forward, I never felt like I fit in. And so I was the odd person out, even in North Idaho, even amongst a bunch of white people. Now, I could blend in to a certain degree, but how I talk and how I perceive and interact with the world is essentially different than the vast majority of people that I end up meeting. Now, I always meet souls and other individuals who, I connect with and everything, and so that's good. That's very good. But I'm just kind of putting out there that no matter where I've gone, I've always been a foreigner. All right, there's been no place that I have ever been to, and I've been like, oh yeah, I'm in good company, in so much as I'm one of the many. No matter where I've been, I'm a foreigner. And going back to my experiences in North Idaho, we were not an upper class family. All right, we were certainly not an upper class family. We were probably at the best, even middle class, and maybe at worst, at some periods in time, probably lower middle class. But we, through, sacrifice of my father and my mother, who worked as well. I know that my mom wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, but just financially speaking, she had to work. And so she did, is the best way to say it. And my father had a job the entire time, worked very hard, and financially kept us afloat. So I didn't have like the upper class people, driving a new car, having all of these access things. At the same time, I was never truly in direct poverty where we did not have enough. We did not have enough food. We would go to the food bank and stuff, but it was to supplement our food and everything, and it was available and everything. But it was never like if we don't go to the food bank, we're gonna starve, And for me, that was later on in my life. So I was always interested in that too, because the divide and the prejudice of people had always been a fascinating subject for me, and it's because I feel like I received a lot of it, and I didn't understand why. And looking back, I think I somewhat had a victim mentality. And a part of it is that I would go into situations blind, you guys. I would just kind of walk into a situation blind and expecting a mutual kind of love to exist. And that is not usually the situation in the world. This has been my experience, where if we're going to use the terminology from the islands, having the aloha spirit. And it's something that I feel like I have, or I understand it in so much as, love your neighbor, give, we're all in this together, and it's much better to treat each other with respect and kindness, all right? And I would just kind of walk into situations expecting everybody to have the same attitude, and that's just not the world all the time, I guess is the best way to say it. You are going to encounter individuals who are operating from, I would almost call it a deep victim mindset. And so they're very defensive. They're immediately looking to attack anybody outside or who's perceived different by them in order to be the first, right? And this is what a victim mindset actually does. And this is, I've talked to my spiritual talks about this. This is why hyper-aggressive people are usually the most insecure and the most weak. And that's why that ends up happening, is that they have to defend themselves, and they defend themselves by attacking first. And be like, well, I don't want to get attacked, so I'm going to attack. I want to be the aggressor rather than the aggressed upon. Ironically, that usually creates conflict. And so, yeah, you can be the first to aggress, and some people will back down from that. But a lot of people are just going to aggress back, and then that's just going to create massive conflict. And so that doesn't solve that problem, all right? And standing up to violence is one thing, but instigating violence is a totally separate issue. And I think that it's got to be addressed maybe on a collective level, but first on an internal, individual basis. So Long story short, I was always kind of an alternate lifestyle person. I was very dissatisfied with most of corporate culture, definitely with the direction that the what we call the U.S. government was going down. I didn't agree with any political system. The left and the right seemed incomplete to me and were blind, seemingly. And I won't get into it too much, but it's just the same things seemed to end up happening no matter who was in charge. Left or right, they would say one thing and do the same thing. And so my premise is, on a political basis, and I know you guys will probably get mad at me, especially if you're hyper into politics, but the corporate world controlled both the left and the right. And so corporate doctrines ended up being passed no matter who. And that was my experience. That's what I witnessed. All right, it didn't matter who was in office. It didn't matter which party was in control. Talking points would be thrown out, but the same things would end up happening. And so that's just from my long experience. Now I'm 41 years old, so I have some experience with politics, especially since I was interested in it. And different points in my life, I did go back and forth. And it's funny to see the different prejudices of the different sides play out of the left and the right paradigm. Because it's essentially the same. It's the same prejudice. All right, it's the same kind of attitude that I see patterned everywhere through racism, through politics, through everything. It's this prejudice that I'm talking about. It's an internal weakness, and then assigning the responsibility essentially for oneself and saying, you're the reason, right? You're the reason that things are bad. And whoever you are, you could be anything, a different skin color, a different political party, a different class, yada, yada, yada. Some of those things, it's interesting to talk about stereotypes. Oh, no. I don't know if you can hear that. We're just going to kind of keep going, you guys, because I don't know where that is. Like I said, unedited, you guys. So the issue that I'm getting a hold of is that so much of prejudice is based upon internal framework. And it's that internal framework which ends up creating our patterns and our associations and how we interact with the world, and then it creates our experience. So, in a nutshell, I was very dissatisfied with everything, joined a few different communes looking for a place to belong, and I always felt like an outsider. Like, no matter where I went, I ended up being an outsider. And so I essentially became the identity of the perpetual outsider. And so I'd always dreamed of Hawaii. I'd been here a long time ago in my youth, and I thought it was just magical. I just thought it was so magical, you guys. Like, I won't even get into details how magical I thought it was, because for years and years after, years and years and years, I would go to sleep and I would dream of Hawaii. And it was like a heaven. And I was always on my way there. I was never quite getting there, flights and everything. I did have a few dreams that I was actually there. And it's interesting looking back, because there was still stuff going on where it was beautiful being there, but I still had to work through things. And so, that might have just been part of my journey as well. So me migrating here is kind of what I ended up doing. And I dropped everything. I had been homeless for a good amount of time. I'd say just about 2 years. And then I was able to get out of it and started establishing myself in eastern Washington, close to North Idaho. And things were going okay. And I also experienced quite a bit of discrimination, right? Prejudice against homeless people, right? And so I would get it on both sides, where I'm fairly well-spoken and I'm very polite. And so people would be surprised. And I always try to look as nice as I can, It's just like I enjoy feeling good about how I dress and everything. And, I don't mind being messy sometimes. If I can, I try to smell good. Like, that's just an issue for me. If I start, smelling myself and it's like, whoa, man, I'm going to find something to make it just smell a little bit better, whatever it happens to be. Because that's just a preference of mine, even like all my long stint of being homeless on the mainland and in Hawaii, I did my best to make sure I had deodorant and to smell as nice as I could, because I felt like it was the minimal thing that I could do. And okay, just kind of cutting ahead, I know I've been kind of rambling here, right? I did end up coming to Hawaii, and this was due to a situation. I had ended up leaving a job. I felt like there was embezzlement going on. I didn't want to be a part of it, and so and I was just a lower employee at this particular institution, but they were under investigation for certain things, and I knew that I was enabling it by just being a low level employee. Even if I wasn't liable on a legal basis, I felt like I was enabling them through just working for them. And most of the employees were the same. They were just like, just keep your head down, do the minimum amount of work for your job, don't treat it too seriously, and then, just get your paycheck. And I've just never been that kind of a person, so for better or for worse, I like to participate in wherever I'm at fully as much as I can. So I had quit that job, left that job. I did have a living situation, but it ended up falling through. I won't get into the technical details of it. Just where I was staying basically ended. I had tried to make plans with somebody else, a work buddy, but they ended up bailing at the last second. And so I was going to be back in the shelters. And so, I built up a little bit of a savings, and I decided to roll the dice because I actually didn't even have the correct ID in order to do this. But I was like, I'm going to book a plane ticket to Hawaii, and chose Oahu because it was the most populated island. And I figured, I'll get my start on Oahu. I've already been homeless before, and I know it's an island. I'm used to navigating in a small area, so that won't be an issue. And I felt like Spokane was a pretty big city, and people are probably going to laugh at that. Spokane's not that big of a city in the long run. And so I decided to come to Oahu. And I was homeless in Oahu. Let me take that back. I'm still homeless in Oahu. I do have a room that I'm in right now that someone from a local church is putting me up with. But that's even a long story in itself. I'm not going to get into it in this particular video because it's not about that. But what I ended up experiencing here was just very interesting, very interesting. And if I could go back and talk to mainlanders about Hawaii, or at least the culture that I've been exposed to and the interactions that I'm with, Hawaii is a very different kind of an energy. All right. I've been to several different states on the mainland, and everywhere you go on the mainland is considered, is more or less the same. And there's local customs and culture and everything. It could be because, I'm, white, that I didn't experience the degree of prejudice that would be there if I wasn't. And I very much understand that. But for, I guess, in this case, other white mainlanders coming to Hawaii, it truly felt like I was leaving the United States. And being here and interacting with it, yes, I know it's technically it's technically a state of the United States. Yeah, it is, on paper. And I think that's part of the prejudice as well that exists here, where there's still resentment over how this area became considered a United States state. And to me, this doesn't necessarily speak about white people. And I would really hope that my native-born Hawaiian brethren understand that, where this is about, if anything, this is about classism, you guys. All right, there's been different classes of people, and this is also why I didn't like politics, where it felt like basically not even the upper crust guys. We're talking about the crumbs on the upper crust, like controlling the entire pie, or seeding their tentacles, if you want to call it that, into the entire pie. And that's what I've experienced in many different areas, and Hawaii is no different, you guys. I'm sorry to break it to you. If you drive out all of the white people from your from your land, guess what? There's still going to be massive prejudice. All right, and I would say part of it would be classism, but I need to take a step back here, and that's probably a lot of my own projection. I have felt like leadership, and especially any kind of people who have obtained wealth, are like designated to be servants, of the people. Now that is, I feel like, such a huge tenet, where if we cannot be servants of the people when we come into a place of wealth, we are not deserving of that wealth. I very much mean that. I very much mean that. And this is why I think it's such a crime to see what has happened, in American politics, but in business. There's been this mentality of, for lack of a better word, the upper of the upper crust, the crumbs on the upper crust, an elitism and almost an ideology where I have only experienced, I would feel like a close to that on the very opposite end of the spectrum, where there is homeless populations and people who completely see everybody else who is not homeless and living in their circumstances with them as beneath them. You guys. And I've also experienced and rubbed slight elbows with some of the upper crust, and I also got to experience that too, where anybody who was not of their birth or of their inherited wealth status were beneath them. And this is, for lack of a better word or phrase to go about it, this is very against the aloha spirit, you guys. And so individuals who are operating from that level, I very much agree with that. All right. And that exists on both ends of the spectrum. I think those who have that attitude, from the crumbs of the upper crust, they are just as in poverty spiritually as the ones who have zero wealth and who have that same attitude of hatred and despising of anybody who is not like them. All right. This is the factor that I think is what causes what I would call spiritual poverty, you guys. And what I have experienced too is that poverty is on such a deep level because the upper crust is so dependent upon lies and deception and deceit in order to keep their wealth, because that's a scam. They're not being servants, all right? And if anything, they're being the servants of, I'm just going to not mince words. I feel like they're the servants of evil. Not every person of wealth is evil, okay? And just like not every impoverished person, not every homeless person is evil either, all right? We got to be careful, though. We got to be careful. We got to have discernment with who we're interacting with. And this happens, in my opinion, doing the work, all right? Doing the spiritual work. If we're using this language, and this is also why I'm very careful with this, and I phrase it in this way. Yes, I'm a Christian. Yes, I attend a church. And yes, I do read the Bible. That does not mean that I'm holy. It does not mean that I'm devout. It does not mean that I'm even having a spiritual practice. All right? It is by ye fruits you shall know them. All right? Through my words, through my actions, through my behaviors, you will know who I am. Just like them, just like them, just like us all. And that is the key difference. All right? And so I do want to talk about it, in so much as there is I'm trying to think of the right words here, but there is deep wisdom that can help guide us to live in a way that we were meant to. Like this is why I love the Bible so much. God wants us to prosper, all right? And this is not necessarily a widely held Christian belief yet, all right? Yet. But God is, Emmanuel. God is with us. God is for us. God is not outside of us, okay? God is with us and expressing himself through us, all right? And dare I say, herself through us. And that's something for another story, all right? Another video. And this is also why, look at what I'm saying, you guys. This can alienate me from the very religion that I am a part of. All right. So no matter where I go, I am always the foreigner, it seems. But I embrace it. All right. What can I do? If I can't help but be myself. And this is what I would have for everybody experiencing prejudice in some different way, is to redirect it to an internal framework, because this is what's going to create our experiences going forward. And so, to some degree, I get it, especially being in Hawaii. All right. I'm a Haole. I like to say I'm and I could be mispronouncing this, right? But I'm a Haole Hanu Ana. All right. I'm a breathing Haole. Okay. And that's okay with me. I'm not going to deny my whiteness. I'll joke around about it even. I'm Whitey McWhite, you guys. Like how I sound, how I look. I can't help it, all right? It's what I was born with. I can't change that. I'm not going to pretend to be something different, too. That's just, it is what it is. With that said, I'm teachable in the way where I want to learn the culture, okay? I especially that, when in Rome, act like the Romans, right? And I didn't come to Hawaii to enforce people being white here, all right, or to invade anything, all right. I know this term isn't really looked. It's also maybe with prejudice now at this point, but it's just like I'm an immigrant, all right. I'm an immigrant from the mainland who came to Hawaii, and I look to acclimate here. I look to honor the culture here, all right. If anything, I'm probably a lot not like some other Howleys in so much as if I knew, and I'm very spiritual in my practices, guys, where if I feel like the spirit of the islands did not want me here, I would just take off. I'm not here to do anything but fit in that way. All right. And even if I don't fit in the sense of skin color, even if I interpret the Bible in a different way than maybe some other people do, than other Christians do, it does not mean that I don't fit in. All right. And I am really starting to see this. All right. Tying it back to this, all right, what I was talking about before in so many words, just the aloha spirit. What does that mean? And to a mainlander, it's something that I'm even interpreting, all right? And I would be the first to admit that. But what I see it as is it is a sign of humility and respect, honoring nature, honoring the land, honoring people, honoring each other. It's seeing that we're all in the same boat together, all right? Even the people who are disrespectful. With that said, I very much get that aspect of the aloha spirit too. And I, agree with it. One of the things that I like to say on my channel is there's only one absolute, and that's it. And so, yes, I think being accommodating and respectful of all people, but people who do not reciprocate that respect, it's good to note that, all right? We don't need to attack them. We don't need to be aggressive to them, per se, all right? But it's good to note that, all right? And be aware of interacting with them. Because those kind of individuals operate on many different levels, but I would say from the impoverished to the upper crust, all right, these people will stab you in the back, all right? And I've been stabbed in the back by both sides, all right? By the rich and by the poor. And it's because they are impoverished spiritually, all right? And so part of this journey for me has been learning discernment, but at the same time, I don't want that to color my journey where I am become prejudiced by having prejudice against me. And that's a big aspect moving forward, okay, that I just want to get for my channel, and I just wanted to get this out there for the most part. So that was what was important. All right, that's just what I wanted to talk about. And I'm not here to save anybody, all right? We leave that up to Jesus, okay? I'm not here to save nobody, all right? I'm here to share my experience, share my testimony, and kind of, talk about plans, what I would have for people, because anything that I talk about, the spiritual salvation that I talk about, it's for anybody. It's for anyone. It's for anyone. It doesn't matter your skin color. It doesn't matter your class, all right? It doesn't matter your political affiliation. None of those things matter, all right? Salvation is for everybody. And it comes in a way where it doesn't even have to be in the same language that I'm using, All right. Now, that's a key factor. All right. Yes, I know that Christians are supposed to say it has to come through Jesus Christ. But then, how I interpret this is, what is Jesus Christ? If Jesus Christ is the truth, the way, and the life, all right, that's all that's necessary, you guys. If you give your life to the truth, the way, and the life, no matter what name or form it comes in, it will save you. It will save you. Okay, the truth sets us free. And at the same time, before it sets us free, it might give us a few slaps around the face if we're acting unconscious, if we're acting in a way which is counterintuitive to it, all right, to the truth. And there's a reason for that, all right? Everything makes sense. When we operate in a true, honest, and authentic way, from a place of genuineness, everything turns out better, all right? Emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, every way, every single way. And that's just what I come in, you know. I know I get kind of heated or serious about that kind of stuff, but it's because of this is, to me, this is a serious subject, all right? I see the impoverished state of so many people, and I've lived it, all right? I've been living it in every single way on the mainland, in here. I see the prejudice in people's eyes, all right? Doesn't matter what your skin color is, doesn't matter even what your class is, all right? That prejudice exists everywhere. Doesn't even matter what religion you are, all right? I'm just listing off stuff at this point. Do you see what I'm talking about? So much of it has to do with our internal state, and we use these material things to make an excuse to reinforce that internal state. And so I'm done. I'm done with that, you guys. I'm done with that. It's the best way I can say it. I'm probably going to be around it, and I'm going to operate the best that I can with it. And I'm not going to take it personally either. Like on the Whitey McWhite level, I get it, you guys. And I'm respectful, okay? And I would also say that it's my job in this case to maybe slap around some of the other white people, all right, who do not understand what respect means. Because I think that's where we're best interacted with, all right? So if I'm a Christian, I need to help police other Christians to be Christian-like. If I'm a white person, I need to police other white people how to be, a decent white person. All right. If I operate on a political spectrum, I'm going to police other people of that political spectrum. Okay, and by police, I mean very lightly. All right, in so much as I'm going to call people out. All right. And just as an individual who's been more of a people pleaser, who has been more of a person to go along to get along for most of my life, this is a huge thing for me. All right. I'm not looking to aggress anybody. I'm not looking to bully anybody. It's not about that. I don't even like the word police, but I can't even think of another word. Regulate. That even then, I don't want to dance around corporate wording either. I just want to get the intent. I want to get the message across here, where rather than point to other groups and say they need to change, I think first off we need to say, all right, what's inside me as an individual? How can I change myself to better fit in with the world, with my culture, with my island, whatever that happens to be? And how can I help the group of my people better represent respect, honesty, authenticity, what it means to truly carry the aloha spirit? And so I'll leave it there. I think I've gone on pretty long here, right? Oh man, 33 minutes? Yeah, we've been talking for a while, you guys. So, whew, it's a long journey. I'm glad you're here with me. I know this was more of a political commentary, maybe a social commentary, than a spiritual commentary, but they're all related, you guys. They're all related. The two need to be made one, all right? I keep saying that too if you watch my other stuff. So anyway, like I said, I'll leave it at that. I'm really grateful that you're here. Please, all right, please give me likes if you like it. Subscribe if you want to see more. If you want to see me be more uncomfortable and challenge myself even more, then I definitely recommend you subscribe, all right? So, yeah, guys, thank you. Let's keep doing this. Let's keep doing the work. Let's let the Holy Spirit guide us, in any way, shape, or form. All right. In any words or labels those come in, because it doesn't even have to necessarily come in those labels. The truth, the way, and the life. All right. What the intent is behind that, what that means. All right. Let the truth guide us. Let's love the truth, and it will set us free. So yeah, love you guys. All right. Whew. So, yep. Here I am, you guys, living on Hawaii. All right. And more than ever before, I'm starting to feel more welcome. And I hope it's because of the aloha spirit that I come in, and that I am integrating with my community and the island itself. All right, I am a guest here. I am an immigrant here, and I do hope to make this my home. And only time will tell whether that's going to be that way. But even more than the islands themselves, I am a guest here on the world, and I do hope to make the world my home, and only time will tell if that's the truth, all right? So, yeah. Peace out. Love within, and catch you on the flip side.